I coded a simulation to understand how a simple disease can turn into a global epidemic with hundreds of millions of people getting sick, and also to see if there are any solutions to avoid reaching that stage. I had already made the first video about natural selection that did really well, and what I love about this kind of video is that it's often very counterintuitive. Also, this video will probably remind you of a lot of major decisions that were made during the COVID-19 epidemic. We are at war. And seeing them with real little characters in a fake city makes it much easier to understand why those decisions were made. We'll start with a very simple simulation. We'll put 99 healthy creatures and 1 sick creature in a closed area. As the video goes on, we'll make the simulation more complex to run different experiments. For example, we'll see what happens if we set up a music festival or test whether lockdown is really a solution. Obviously, it's super important, I have to remind you, I'm making my observations as an amateur. I'm absolutely not trained in this field, and you really need to see this video as entertainment and something to watch out of curiosity. I relied a lot on the work of Primer and 3 Blue 1 Brown. I tried to make a more accessible and visual video, but if you want to go deeper into the subject, their videos are excellent and I'll put them in the description for you. Alright, in this video, you won't see those large blocks of numbers from our simulation statistics. Instead, I turned them into graphs for better visuals. But if you use AI in your daily life, you know that this is the kind of document you can send to an AI for analysis. And the best tool for that is Mammoth.ai. To put it simply, Mammoth.ai is a platform that brings together all the best artificial intelligence models on the market in a single interface. The main advantage is precisely this multi-model approach. Economically speaking, it's much cheaper than subscribing to each provider separately, since access to their entire catalog starts at just 10 euros per month, and you get access to the premium version of all the AIs. And on top of that, you benefit from the fact that if you're not satisfied with an answer from one AI, you can, in just 2 clicks like this, try again with another one. Whether it's Claude, ChatGPT, Mistral, Gemini, or even DeepSeek. It's always useful to compare several AIs and not be dependent on just one. It's also super effective when you're generating images. If I ask ChatGPT to imagine what my simulation might look like, here's what it would generate. And this is what Gemini would create, which is totally different. Returning to my original document with many numbers, I can now test it using their new Agent Mode feature. Basically, it's a mode that breaks down a big data processing and file creation task into lots of subtasks delegated to AI agents to get more advanced results. Finally, if you work with sensitive data, you should know that it's a French company. They are subject to European regulations, which means they won't keep your prompts and your data won't be used to train the provider's models. Everything is on Mammoth, mammoth.ai. I'll add the link in the description if you want to try it and see if it works for you. So that's our closed world. It's extremely simple. There are 250 little creatures that live by moving around randomly. They are green, that's because they're healthy. And we're going to place a single sick creature, which is red. The rule is that if a sick creature touches a healthy creature, there's a very small chance it will infect it. If that's the case, it gets sick and can infect others. There's no recovery or immunity yet. While talking to you, 15 minutes passed in my simulation, which is running in fast forward. There's still just 1 sick person. I'm generating a real-time graph here so you can see how the number of sick people evolves. Okay, let's speed it up. There, now it's starting to spread a bit. But it's very slow. The disease really doesn't spread all at once. We're at 2 infected, 4, 5, 6. Alright, let's let it run even faster. And I'll let you imagine what this first graph might look like. Nothing surprising, everyone got sick. The evolution graph is exponential. The disease starts slowly, then suddenly spreads rapidly, infecting everyone. That's what an epidemic looks like. Otherwise, we haven't learned much yet. To add a bit of realism, we're going to introduce a new factor, recovery. If you can't recover, everyone gets sick. But if recovery is possible, will everyone still get sick? In reality, we rarely stay sick for life since our bodies fight disease to recover. And it's even better than just recovering. We become immune. When the body has fought off a disease, it remembers it, so we can't catch it again. We're immune. If we go back to our world, we start from scratch. Except that when a creature gets sick, it will naturally recover after 2 days. It will become immune. And it will turn grey so we can easily see it. Normally, the red curve will turn into a grey curve, because that's the curve of the immune population. And in what form? Okay, alright, the start is just like the first experiment, but this time the peak is much lower because the creatures recover. With more immune creatures, there are fewer sick ones, and the disease eventually disappears. That's interesting to know. That's what we want to do, make the disease disappear. And we see that there are 2 people who never got sick. And still 248 people did get sick. You see, it's not a perfect situation. We need to find some solutions. If the whole city doesn't get sick, it means herd immunity is possible. We'll revisit this later. Our main goal is to find ways to improve improve this score, which will be clearer in the next experiment. We're turning this simulation into a city with houses. But first, I need to introduce the Oni concept we'll use in this video. This is the Oni concept that seems serious, but it's actually easy to understand. If we wanted to play scientists, we would look in our simulation while the epidemic is spreading at the average number of people that a sick person will infect. It's a fundamental number, and that's what we call R0. Well, it means that one sick person infects 2 people on average. It's super important for understanding how dangerous a virus is. In my simulation, with the parameters we've chosen, the R0 is about 2. And to give you a comparison, on average, the flu has an R0 of 1 to 1.3. COVID initially was about 2 to 2.5. Smallpox is about 6, and measles is actually between 12 and 18. Yeah, it's really intense. This is just to give you a sense of scale. Obviously, it varies depending on a lot of different factors. The R0 can be calculated with this simple equation using 3 variables. I'm showing it to you, but we won't be doing any math. This is the only equation we'll look at. It's just so you understand that to reduce the damage an epidemic can cause, we need to lower these 3 variables in order to ultimately lower the R0. That's the challenge. This will make even more sense when I show you this in our virtual city. This time, we're going to add houses. In each house, we'll put 3 creatures. We'll also add shared places. This could be shopping centers, gyms, restaurants, places where people meet. For us, we'll add offices and parks. Each creature is associated with a specific place, and every day, it follows a very monotonous routine. Clearly, you can tell we're not really calculating happiness in this city. When it wakes up, it goes to work. And when it's done working, it goes back home. I'll also add a small change to the contagion rule. Here, I've condensed everything into a tiny space. The creatures touch every time they go to their place, which isn't realistic since they'd all get infected at once. So now it's only when they're in a place with a sick person that they have a chance of getting sick themselves. There you go. We're going to do a first quick little experiment with this city system. I want to show you that the R0 can be different from one city to another. This is going to be our countryside village. To exaggerate things, there's a lot less shared space, so many creatures work from home. On the other hand, this is a big city. All the creatures work in shared spaces. I'm starting the simulations and displaying the R0 value live. I've increased the time by 20. As you can see, the R0 differs between these worlds. It's much higher in the city, making the virus more contagious there. So, what makes a virus contagious isn't just how it's made, it's also how often people cross paths. Look, I'll show you the R0 formula again. The number of contacts, transmission probability, and duration of illness all matter. These variables can be reduced, which lowers the R0. That's the key point, otherwise, these efforts wouldn't make sense. To clearly show the importance of these 3 variables, I'll do one last mini experiment. This time, let's arbitrarily set the R0 at 2 or 2.5. I'm going to adjust the parameters so that it's 2 or 2.5. Except this time, we have 4 different configurations. I'll show you the variables that change depending on the cities on the screen. Well, my computer is going to heat up now. 10,000 people. That's wow. I'll let all this run in time-lapse. We'll see if the graph of sick people changes with the same R0 regardless of having 1,000 or 10,000 people, or the illness lasting 2 or 10 days. This graph is crucial because it shows whether an epidemic was severe and if we controlled it. Here you have it, the counterintuitive result. The graph remains nearly unchanged, with the same percentage of people affected and a nearly identical peak height. So actually, no matter the size of the population or the duration of the infection, it doesn't change the final outcome. To change the outcome, that's what we need to manage to lower. Maybe we could start by closing the most popular places, like party venues. Well, I haven't added those yet. I'll add some. Watch, here we go. I'm including a major music festival. Closing party venues really damages morale. Honestly, that's what got people talking. But to understand why we did that, well, I'm going to illustrate in an exaggerated way why we had to close them. Specifically with this festival that we're about to open. This festival is an event that will take place every Friday in our city. It's so popular that 100% of people go there. You can see where this is going. It's obviously going to get out of hand. But to what extent? Well, I'm starting the simulation. We created a giant incubator. The R0 shot up really high, up to 6. It stabilized at 3 after the festival. That's far from the previous 2 to 2.5, and the peak is extremely high. Everyone is sick at the same time, it's a disaster scenario. If everyone gets sick at once, no one can work and hospitals are overwhelmed. Closing this place reduces contacts and lowers R0, which is why we're doing this gradually. We'll begin by banning gatherings over 100 people, and gradually tighten the rule to include concerts, nightclubs, and possibly restaurants if needed. We're eliminating more and more possible points of contact to try to flatten the curve, so that hospitals in particular can manage the epidemic much better. Now we're going to try the exact opposite, locking down the population. Is it really miraculous? That means we're going to completely ban all points of contact. Here's the rule for this 5th experiment. When we detect 54 infections, we close shared spaces. What's going to happen? Initially, cases rise slowly, then surge, and that's when we lock down. Well, unsurprisingly, the result is clear. Here, we've completely flattened the curve. It's a perfect test. In reality, it's never this perfect. Even during a lockdown, people still see each other, go to work, and so on. It does help contain the disease, but it's an extreme solution, since it restricts people's freedom of movement. It also hurts morale and causes economic problems. I'm not even talking about what restaurants went through during COVID, just to name one example, so it would still be good to find less drastic solutions. If we go back to our Arnaud formula, we can also influence this second variable, the probability of transmission. Let's imagine, for example, that we introduce the well-known preventive measures. Suppose the creatures keep 1 meter apart, wash their hands, and wear masks in shared spaces. Arbitrarily, let's say this lowers the contamination rate by 30%. Let me show you right away what the graph would look like. Well, we still managed to flatten the curve. It works very well, and it's clearly a less restrictive measure in daily life. Among the other decisions you've already heard about, there's the concept of quarantine. That's what we systematically do, for example, when a new disease is brought into France. We immediately put the first patients in quarantine. First, we're going to add testing to the simulation. It's a bit like the famous COVID test we had to take at the slightest symptom of the disease. And then, we add hospitals. That's a pretty cool thing during an epidemic. The rule is that when a creature gets sick, it gets tested after 12 hours. Then, it goes to the hospital to be isolated until it recovers. If we go back to our R0 formula here, we're tackling the third variable. We're reducing the infectious period. Yeah, in this perfect situation, it's only during the first 12 hours of illness that you're contagious, Ben. I say perfect, but in reality, it's much less so. The result I'll show will likely be less significant in practice with this measure. Let's go. Well, it's getting repetitive. You understand this graph. The color that changes is purple. Those are the quarantined ones. And indeed, quarantine is also an effective measure. Not as effective as a full lockdown, but much easier to implement daily and less restrictive. Only the sick are quarantined. The subtle point, by the way, in reality, is that some people are asymptomatic. They carry the disease, they're contagious, but they don't know they're sick. And so, well, they don't get tested. And there are also, well, I haven't mentioned them, but people who refuse to go into quarantine. There are actually quite a lot of them. It's important because look, I've redone my graph, and this time I estimated that 20% of people are asymptomatic. These are the people in orange. As a result, unlike before, the disease spreads more slowly and lingers. It was even worse during COVID, because with COVID, 40 to 50% of infections happened before people showed any symptoms. Even harder to control, and it lasts over time. Other diseases are much easier to control, because transmission happens after the person shows symptoms. So they have time to get diagnosed and stay at home. The ultimate technique I want to try before introducing death, it's weird to say it like that, but also birth, by the way, well, it's vaccination. You must have expected it from the start. It's something we've all probably gone through since we were little. It was even one of the possible requirements to get the famous Health Pass in 2021. I might bring back a lot of bad memories for many of you. I'm removing the hospitals and replacing them with doctors. These are the buildings here. When 20 cases are detected, we'll force the entire population to get vaccinated. They will turn blue, and that will mean they're immune. Yeah, a vaccine doesn't arrive very quickly in a new epidemic, because you have to do research and a lot of testing before you can create one and put it on the market. But the principle is very powerful. We'll immunize people against the disease before they get it. I'm simplifying and not giving a lecture. That's not the point of this video. I'm not an expert and not advising you to do anything. Let's start our simulation and see the results. Everyone turns blue. It's satisfying. A new color. It turns into a Smurf world. Well, we can see that this vaccine theory, if it works as they say, is a really interesting solution. The peak is very low, it drops off really quickly, and above all, overall there are so many fewer creatures that got sick. We're coming back a bit to what we saw during experiment 2. Whether it's naturally or now with a vaccine, we end up reaching what's called herd immunity. Maybe for an R0 of 2 or 2.5 it would be enough, I'm just guessing, for 60% of the population to be immune to finally trigger the slowdown of the disease. Ultimately, it will protect even unvaccinated people. But not everyone should rely on that, or no one would get vaccinated. If the virus can't find enough hosts, it stops spreading. This herd immunity can technically be achieved naturally if the disease starts affecting a lot of people. And we see in our simulation that the overall situation comes under control much more quickly with this vaccine. In the very last experiment I want to show you, I'm going to add the possibility of being born and dying, and you see that just this mechanism paradoxically creates something quite unexpected. Here we have a fairly complete simulation where people can go into quarantine, get vaccinated, can be asymptomatic, and so on and so forth. I've changed the percentages a bit in a very arbitrary way for all these variables, but that's not really important. The only big rule we're going to add now is that our creatures will have a lifespan of 3 weeks. Each will have a random starting age, sick or not. After 3 weeks, they die and are replaced. I'll start the simulation and explain my reasoning. Here, you might think that this won't change much, and yet, what it changes is that even if a creature was immune, well, by definition, if it dies and another is born, that one won't be immune. I don't know if you see the subtlety. Now I'm going to do a huge time lapse over dozens and dozens of days, and with the graph next to it, I think this is the most satisfying result of our experiments. Yeah, I get satisfaction from curves. I'm a big nerd. What's going on? Here we're discovering how, among other things of course, a disease can manage to never die out. Just like at the start, we get our first wave of disease. It starts to go down, except that the population is renewing itself at the same time. And when there are enough non-immune people, a new wave appears. The disease persists from generation to generation. We say it has become endemic. That's the case, for example, with chickenpox. Everyone catches it when we're little, then we become immune, but it doesn't disappear over the years. And that's why there are some diseases we vaccinate against from a very young age. That's what made it possible to eradicate diseases like, for example, smallpox. And we can imagine that if we ever decided to stop vaccinating because the disease has disappeared, well, maybe it could actually come back. It's a never-ending struggle. I hope you can see just how important the science of epidemiology is. Obviously, this is just a very simplified introduction based on what I know. I'm passionate about the idea that we could go further, like imagining viruses mutating into variants or becoming deadly. Don't take my analysis as absolute truth. Check out these two people's work instead. Their English videos are great if you want to explore the topic further. I'll add the links in the description. If you have simulation ideas, share them in the comments and subscribe to catch future episodes. This was Johan. See you.